Nailed with Cupid, sure shot, cause you were the finest one like Sailor Jupiter. Hot like stovetop, sexy in the clothes you rock, stacked like pancakes from top T socks. What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG on the YouTube.com down there. We like magic, you know by now, and today I've got a budget deck for you you've been wanting to see for a while, apparently. Everybody freaked out when I told you I was about to do this deck, so I guess you guys want to see it. This is $50 red-white Siege Dreadnought. The reason we're able to give the deck such an awesome, metal name is because of a two-card combo that everyone was really excited about from the moment they noticed it, which didn't take long, and that is Consulate Dreadnought and Siege Modification. Now, we're going to play 4 of both of these, and the basic concept here is pretty simple. You know, it's right there. All you got to do is plunk down your Consulate Dreadnought on turn 1, and then on turn 3, you put your Siege Mod on it, and you swing for 10, theoretically winning by turn 4. But, you know, we're playing against somebody. It's always a problem. And, there's some things we have to worry about in this format. Obviously, the combo can just be chump blocked, which is going to happen a lot of the time. It can be Fatal Push to great effect. That's a 2-for-1 for just 1 mana on your opponent's side. It can be Unlicensed Disintegration if you're on the draw. There are some things that we have to worry about in this format. But honestly, dice to removal is almost never a really convincing argument for why cards aren't good. And there are some, I think, somewhat convincing arguments for why this combo could be good right now. The number one most convincing argument is that you swing for 10 on turn 3. I still think that is probably the most intriguing reason to try to make this deck a thing. But there are some, actual arguments. First of all, not many people are playing Enchantment Hate at all right now. Sometimes you'll see Natural State out of the board or something, but really not a whole lot of stuff that deals with enchantments that people are actually playing right now. So you won't have to worry about that so much, if that's any consolation. And, the card, it doesn't do too well against Push or Disintegration or any of those. But there are some, pretty, well played, we'll say, removal spells right now that this doesn't die to. A lot of people are playing Harness Lightning, and good luck getting 11 energy to kill my Dreadnought. I don't think it's worth it at that point. And people are playing, Grasp of Darkness somewhat sparingly, and that doesn't hit this either. So, even though it dies to some removal, it doesn't die to all removal, which is an important point to make. But Siege Modification can't be the only thing that animates Consulate Dreadnought. We can also, crew Consulate Dreadnought if we have the creatures to, but that's, the dumbest way to crew a Consulate Dreadnought. So we're going to play some other ways to crew it, starting with Start Your Engines, a card which is actually awesome, and we're going to play 3 copies. I don't think it's entirely necessary to play 4 copies of Start Your Engines. Usually you see 1 copy, and that will either win you the game or put you in very, very close range of winning the game. Start Your Engines is really good. It makes all of your vehicles, which we're playing a lot of in this deck, all of them creatures, and then it gives all your creatures +2/+0. So we've got 28 different things in this deck that Start Your Engines gives a pump to. That's worth pointing out right there. And not only Consulate Dreadnought, we're playing another vehicle that can be tough to crew a little bit, so we need as many ways of just crewing vehicles without having to tap creatures as possible. Plus, this is sort of our overrun. This can really, really, really help win the game. We're playing a total of 13 vehicles in the deck, and being able to crew all of them and still attack with whatever creatures that we have on board, and giving all those creatures and the vehicles too a boost, this is just a great breaker of stalemates, and sometimes you'll even play it on turn 4 just to animate Consulate Dreadnought and swing 9. That's possible too. But you'll probably have played some other vehicles and creatures in that 3-turn span since you played Consulate Dreadnought on turn 1. And sometimes you can Alpha Strike pretty easily with a Start Your Engines, even relatively early in the game. I'm also going to play just 1 copy of Open the Armory as a 5th copy of Siege Modification, basically. I didn't feel like it was necessary to play Aerial Modification, at least in the main deck. I felt like it was only really good against green-black counters. It felt fine in that matchup, but honestly in other matchups it just didn't. It wasn't incredible. It costs so much to play, and it doesn't completely break stalemates when you draw it every time. It's not super reliable. It costs too much for what it does, and you'd think it'd be really good, but I don't even think it's worth playing the 1 copy of Modification. I'd rather spend that slot on one of Open the Armory so we can go and get the good creature enchantment. And it's worth noting that if we have the 5 mana that we're going to spend on Aerial Mod anyway, then we can just play an Open the Armory and a Siege Modification on the same turn. That is also 5 mana. So I just feel like Siege Modification is always good to have. You know, like even if we've got one in play on a Consulate Dreadnought, chances are we want another one anyway, either to hold up in our hand or put on like a Peacewalker Colossus or something, Sky Skiff, who knows. So even if you already have one, you still want more, so I'll play effectively 5 copies. It's time to look at all the other vehicles in the deck. I've told you there's 13, you've already seen 4. Here's the other 9, starting with 3 copies of Peacewalker Colossus. Well, Peacewalker is damn near impossible to crew without tapping at least 2 creatures, which is kind of sucky, but I still think that he's worth it because he's just another way to animate Consulate Dreadnought. And if you have like 2 of these out, they can animate each other, which is kind of cool. That happens sometimes, you know, and like it can animate like Fleetwheel Cruisers and stuff without having to like tap creatures. Like there are reasons why you want to play Peacewalker Colossus. And like we've got Start the Engines, we've got Siege Mod, and like Siege Modification goes on this thing somewhat well. You know, you can swing for 9 if it's got a Siege Modification on it, and you can still like use his ability to animate a Consulate Dreadnought and swing for 7 and 9. Well, it seems pretty good too. So, like, this guy's good enough, I think, to play at least the 3 copies of. But since we'll hardly ever crew him without an enchantment or Start Your Engines, I don't think it's worth playing all 4 because he can be slightly useless at times. Although top decking a second one when you already have one on the battlefield usually feels okay. Like you're usually okay with that. He doesn't cost that much to cast. If he casts with any color mana, he's a 6/6 when he does get to crew, and usually he'll be either 9 or 8 power when he actually crews, because you will have just cast Start Your Engines or Siege Mod. So, like, he's always a huge guy, and he animates other vehicles. He's got to be in the deck. I'm going to play 4 copies of Sky Skiff in the deck as well, and if we had money, we'd just play Heart of Kiran. Probably, I suppose. Like, we're playing enough stuff that can crew Heart of Kiran fairly easily that I'd be okay with doing that. But Sky Skiff crews for only 1, meaning that, like, literally any creature in the deck ever can crew it, which is nice. And if this gets a Siege Mod on it, you've got a 5-power flyer. Like, that's a good deal right there. And even to Start Your Engines give you a 4-power flyer, which is at least some sort of parity with Heart of Kiran. So there's that. Like, for 5 or 10 cents, Sky Skiff is surprisingly effective, and he can turn on like Toolcraft Exemplar on turn 2 the same way a Heart of Kiran could. So there's like synergistic reasons to play a 2-drop artifact in the deck too, and just having like a decent flyer. Again, he's no Heart of Kiran, he's no Smuggler's Copter, but one is too expensive and one is not legal. So I think Sky Skiff is a good way to split the difference here and still play like a relatively effective flyer that we can make pretty big. And we'll finish the vehicles with 2 copies of Fleetwheel Cruiser, although I will acknowledge there's other stuff you could do with this slot if you wanted to play 2 vehicles, you know. The main decision here was Fleetwheel Cruiser versus Untethered Express, and I actually ended up with Untethered Express in the sideboard, and a lot of people are like, that was a decision? And some people will think that Untethered Express is way better, some people will think that Fleetwheel's way better. I think that Fleetwheel does edge it out by a little bit, and it's got good plays against Saheeli combo. You know, they play Saheeli turn 3 on a naked board, you play Fleetwheel the next turn, and eat their Saheeli. I've mentioned that trick a couple of times, but it's important enough in this format that I think it's worth playing Fleetwheel over anything else in this slot. Not to mention that I like that it's a vehicle that for at least 1 turn, we don't have to have any tricks or creatures to animate. You know, it just comes down, swings 5 immediately for only 4, which is like actually an insane bargain. It takes the opponent by surprise. You can either eat a creature on blocks or just get in for 5. It's really good. Eats Planeswalkers a lot. Like, there's a lot to love about Fleetwheel Cruiser. And if we play Start Your Engines, it gets to 7 power. If we want to play a Siege Mod on it, we can. We suddenly got an 8-power trample guy. So knock yourself out with that. Like, I just think there's a lot of reasons to play Cruiser. I think it's a solid card right now. We're going to play some creatures in the deck because, you know, we've got like a lot of ways of crewing vehicles, but we want to also be able to traditionally do it the way you're supposed to do it. So we'll play 15 whole creatures in the deck. But the creatures we do play, we're going to make sure they aid our plan in some way. Starting with 2 copies of Sram Senior Edificer. At first I was playing 3 whole copies of Sram, but honestly I don't think you need 3 whole copies. I think 2 is enough. And, you know, we've got, 17 different auras or vehicles in the deck, which I think is just enough to make Sram effective, but not quite enough to play 3 copies. But when he is on the battlefield, those 17 different things will often lead to at least 1 or 2 extra cards drawn over the course of the game, and that can be really, really important. Now, you could play Depala in the slot. She's a little bit more budget-friendly than Sram is, but Depala's a 3-drop, and we've already got a couple of important things, Siege Modification being the most important thing, to do on turn 3, and we need to fill the hole between turns 1 and 3 here. So I think we need important, strong 2-drops, and Sram is one of the best we could play. Another important 2-drop that I feel like we absolutely need to play is Veteran Motorist, which I'm going to play the full 4 of right here, because even if Veteran Motorist dies almost immediately, then that Scry 2 is still really, really important, you know. We're an aggro deck with a definite game plan that involves a pseudo combo, so we got to be able to find our pieces, you know. If we've dropped a Consulate Dreadnought turn 1, but we don't have the modification in our hand yet, Veteran Motorist can come down turn 2 and really help us dig for the modification that we need, and be like a pretty decently powered creature at the same time. And Veteran Motorist can like crew a lot of different stuff in the deck. You know, it crews Fleetwheel and it crews Sky Skiff super easily. And like gives them a bonus. Like swinging in with a 6-power Fleetwheel is great. Even swinging in with a 3-power Sky Skiff feels nice. I'm also going to play 3 Toolcraft Exemplar for fairly obvious reasons. You know, Toolcraft Exemplar. This thing is only like $1 on TCG Player right now, and it's still like a really awesome card that's played in like the best deck in Standard right now. So I don't know why the card isn't like $5, but we'll take advantage of the fact that it's not. It's still really, really cheap to play, and it's awesome for the deck. You'll very often have an artifact at least by turn 3, and you know, a 1-mana investment for a 3-power creature is pretty amazing. Just ask Delver of Secrets. Like, this is a fine card. We're going to play 2 copies of Pia Nalaar right here, and she kind of just does everything. So we got to play her. And I'm serious. She literally does everything. There's a long list of stuff. She's an artifact for Toolcraft Exemplar. We need as many of those as we can get. If we play Start the Engines, suddenly this thing has 7 power altogether, you know? 2, you know, 3 in the Thopter and then 4 in Pia herself. That's pretty cool, but one of the best things she does is that in a pinch, she can sacrifice vehicles or her own Thopter to make it harder for the opponent to block, which is important in a deck that's looking to get through a 10-power creature. And she can pump artifacts, so she's an important mana sink late in the game. You know, just incredible thing. You know, she can crew Fleetwheel Cruiser and still send her Thopter over, or the Thopter can crew Sky Skiff and you can still send her through. So, like, just insanely versatile card that does a lot of stuff in the deck. This is the glue. But the most expensive piece of cardboard in the deck, but I feel like you gotta play it, is the 4 copies of Selfless Spirit right here. And I know it's gonna cost you like 18 to 20 bucks on TCG Player to get a playset of this, but it is well worth it in this deck. I've already mentioned it is extremely easy to get blown out completely by a couple of cards that everyone's playing. Like, people play Unlicensed, people play Fatal Push right now. And there's other removal spells that we have to worry about on top of those. You know, like To the Slaughter is something we occasionally have to worry about. So to keep from getting blown out so much, I will play Selfless Spirit because he is our absolute best defense against things like Push. Not only that, but what I was saying earlier goes for this too. You know, we need important 2-drops to plug that hole. We've got Consulate Dreadnought turn 1. We've got Modification turn 3. What do we do on turn 2? I actually think that if you start the game with a Consulate Dreadnought and a Siege Mod in your hand, the card that you want on turn 2 the most is Selfless Spirit. I mean, think about it. This is basically like a Bogle's deck in like Pauper or Modern, you know, like a Hexproof Auras deck, you know, but like the thing we're putting the aura on doesn't have hexproof. So it kind of defeats the purpose of something like Bogle's when it doesn't have hexproof. Well, Selfless Spirit doesn't give it hexproof, but it at the very least makes it much, much harder for our opponent to deal with a turn 3 10-power swinger. And to finish off the main deck here, I'll play 2 copies of Built to Smash, which I wouldn't mind playing 3 copies of, honestly, you know. Like, I really don't want to drop a land because I want to make sure that we get to 3 lands on turn 3 as often as possible. So I don't want to push it down a land, but I really would like to play 3 copies of Built to Smash because it's just super good in this deck. You know, obviously we're trying to get through with, you know, 9 and 10 power creatures like Peacewalker Colossus, Consulate Dreadnought, and they can just chump block it. Well, Built to Smash will give those artifact creatures trample, which is super important. Like, Consulate Dreadnought, sure, they can block it, but it's gonna go through for a bunch of damage still. And this goes good on like non-artifact creatures. Like, suddenly Veteran Motorist is 6 power, Pia Nalaar's 5 power. And by the way, you play this on Pia Nalaar's Thopter, you've got a 4 power flyer that tramples suddenly. You can swing for 5 trample flying with a Sky Skiff. That's awesome. You can swing for 8 with a Fleetwheel Cruiser. Like, the card just goes good on everything. It's ketchup. We're going to play 22 lands in the deck, and I think the Needle Spires are pretty necessary, but the good news is they've gone down to like less than $2 on TCG Player, like $1.75, so definitely budget friendly for the most part. And if you have like 6 mana, that's not too bad, one of them being Needle Spires, you can always like attack with your Needle Spires and drop a Built to Smash on it, and suddenly your Needle Spires can deal 10 combat damage. That's insane. Like, and if you have all the mana in the world, like, you can always like, this goes with start your engines fairly well. It can deal up to 8 damage, and you can always like, in a serious pinch, I guess you could drop a Siege Modification on it. Whatever you want to do. You could also swing for 10 that way. So, I think you need the Needle Spires for a bevy of reasons. But if you had the money, you definitely want to put Inspiring Vantage in the deck. You need to do that as soon as possible if you have the money, because it's very important. Here's your sideboard right here. It's fairly self-explanatory. You got Fragmentize for artifacts, including Art of Kieran. You got Shock for your Saheeli combo, and also Authority of the Consuls for your cat combo. You got Aethersphere Harvester against aggro decks. Untethered Express is in there against the green-black counters matchup, mostly because they tend to get relatively grindy, and it's nice to have something that gets crazy over the course of the game. Aerial Modification, ditto for the green-black counters matchup, and not a whole lot else. And then Skysovereign is in there mostly against the aggro matchup. Here are your power rankings right here. Final score of 57 because the deck is still somewhat weak to key removal in the format right now. And the Jeskai Saheeli deck can just hold counter spells up for when you try to siege mod stuff. So, or like start your engines. Like, you can have a real problem against counter spells in this deck too. So there are issues, but if you can get down the golden combo, you can definitely win. Like, if they're not holding a fatal push at the time or a disintegration, if you get it in under counter spells, they now have to deal with a very proactive play on your side of the board. So you can just run down people. It's entirely possible. And even if you never see a Consulate Dreadnought, you will still be able to win some games because we've got a lot of effective creatures in this deck and some, pretty solid vehicles too on top of that. Like, again, you get 2 Peacewalker Colossus in play. That's pretty awesome because they just animate each other and start swinging in. Built to Smash goes on literally everything in the deck. Veteran Motorist and Sram are both decent creatures. Toolcraft Exemplar is proven in the format. Pia Nalaar is a boss in the deck. So we're playing a lot of good cards in a deck that is better than it looks. It's more than the sum of its parts. But whatever you do, just play carefully and play around things you think your opponent might have. It's just, if you play patiently, you really are going to have the temptation to just zoom through as fast as possible. But as usual, play smart and play patient, because if you play around some things your opponent might be trying to do, then you can win the game a lot. That being said, though, if you don't think your opponent has an answer, or if your opponent misses a land drop, go for the throat, because the deck can close the game very, very fast if it has an opening. I'm tapped out for now. That's all we got for this one. I finally got to show you Red-White Siege Dreadnought. Like, I think you've been asking for this one since we saw the cards, so I'm sorry it took me so long. I've had the deck prepared and ready for like 2 weeks. There's just a bunch of stuff I wanted to talk about. And now we got Amonkhet spoilers coming down. I still got to cover the Masterpiece series, because that just came down right before I started recording here, so got a lot to do in the next couple of days, but I really wanted to get this one out to you guys because it seemed like you really wanted it. So let me know how you feel about it down there in the comments. How would you change it? How would you make it better? And how did I make it worse? All that stuff is important to me. But what are we doing next time? As usual, next time I'll finally be doing Cheerios again. This is another deck that you guys have wanted me to revisit for a very, very long time, like a whole 2 months now at this point. So, and Cheerios, I just went back and looked at the views on it the other day. I didn't realize like how popular that video was. So I guess I should probably try and do that again and update it, because I haven't done it since Aether Revolt came out, and we got some stuff in that set. So Cheerios coming super soon for you guys. I may also do the standard Storm deck that's been popping up here and there, because that deck looks super stupid silly, and it's similar to Cheerios, but it doesn't work off of 0 mana cost artifacts. It works off of Paradox Engine. So I'm thinking about doing that deck too. Let me know how you feel. Anyway, if you enjoyed the content, like the content, hit the thumbs up button, helps me out a lot. Check me out on Twitter at SBMTGDev. You can follow me there. You can also subscribe and hit the bell so you get the notifications, so you get deck techs and Amonkhet spoilers and all that stuff. I am Dev from SBMTG. I hope you do all that YouTube stuff. Thanks for watching, my wizards.